Welcome back everyone. For today's video we are going to be taking a look at a couple of my favorite games that have been played by the new world chess champion Ding Liren from China. Now Ding Liren is a player who needs no introduction. He's been amongst the top 10 players in the world for a very long time now, so players are very familiar with his games. Nonetheless, we do think of Ding Liren as being a very positional player. He likes to grind endgames, small positional advantages and openings such as the Catalan, but as these games will demonstrate, Ding Liren is also capable of playing very attacking and aggressive chess along the lines of former world chess champions such as Michail Tal. So let's dive right into the games themselves. First and foremost, we're going to start with this game that Ding Liren plays with the black pieces against Bai Jinshi, also from China. Now, this game was played in the Chinese Chess League in the year 2017. Ding with the black pieces. So the game starts with d4. We get knight to f6, and now we get c4. Ding plays e6 here, knight to c3, bishop b4, standard Nimzo Indian, knight to f3, castles, and now we have this move bishop g5 being played. Again, nothing new thus far. We get c5, e3, pawn trade, and now here Bai Jinshi decides to capture with the queen. Now there is one interesting anecdote to this position. After Ding plays the move knight to c6, queen d3 is played here. However, in the famous leak from the recent world championship match played between Ding and Jan Nepomniachtchi, there was a game featuring this move queen to f4 that was played by Ding Liren against Richard Rapport. So that is one interesting anecdote about this line. Nonetheless, of course, this game was played many years ago and there's no way of knowing what would happen down the road. So we get the move queen to d3 played here by Bai Jinshi, and here Ding plays the move h6, attacking the bishop on g5. In this position, we get the move bishop to h4. Of course, Bai Jinshi would like to keep the pin of the knight here on f6 with the bishop on h4. Ding plays d5, and now Bai Jinshi plays rook to d1, trying to prevent black from taking the pawn on c4, potentially, because now after say queen takes c4 and queen e7, maybe there are even ideas like a3, and if you go bishop d6, now white can trade on f6 here. If you take with the queen, you lose the bishop on d6, and after g takes f6, white can even play a move like queen g4 and queen h4, and it feels really scary. Now the computer doesn't think it's that bad, but nonetheless there are some issues here potentially. So after rook to d1, Ding makes a very committal decision here by playing the move pawn to g5, attacking the bishop on h4. Bai Jinshi plays bishop to g3, and now Ding goes knight to e4. White cannot capture the knight on e4 due to the pin from the bishop on b4. So here we get the move knight to d2. Now it's a very logical move. If white were to play a move like bishop e2, intending to castle the king out of the center, suddenly black can play queen a5, putting massive pressure on this knight on c3, which you cannot move due to the pin. And if white plays a move like rook c1, now you can even grab the pawn on a2. Once again, white can't capture, and after say castles here, black can trade and even play something like knight c5, attacking the queen and potentially the bishop, or even a move like f5 here, over protecting the knight on e4. So Bai Jinshi plays knight d2 here, Ding goes knight to c5, and now we get queen to c2, and here Ding plays d4. Now it's a very uncompromising decision, but it's in the spirit of the position because Ding has already made compromises on the king side by pushing p here with moves h6 and g5, so you want to keep being aggressive. Ding plays d4, Bai goes knight to f3, Ding plays move pawn to e5. If you were to capture the knight, white can simply capture the queen on d8. So e5 is played to overprotect the pawn on d4 here. We get the move knight takes e5, and now Ding decides to do a classic Botez gambit, sacrificing the queen by playing pawn takes knight. Now it's not actually that bad because you're going to get at least one knight, which you've just captured, as well as a rook, and white is going to have trouble developing these pieces on the king side, as we'll see very soon. Game continues with rook takes queen. We get pawn takes pawn, checking the king on e1. And here Bai Jinshi makes a mistake by playing this move king to e2. Now again, for us humans who are not 3500, don't have access to computer programs, it's very easy to understand and overlook this move, which is correct, which would be the move rook to d2. Now I suspect the reason Bai Jinshi did not play this is because he saw rook to d8, pinning the rook on d2 and threatening to capture with your rook on d8. After white goes knight to f3, there are many options here, but bishop g4 is one option, g4 also an option here. Now after g4, white is actually doing great because after queen takes b2, if you take the knight on f3, I can sack the queen with queen takes bishop, and after knight takes queen, now you lose your rook on d8, and with it you lose the game as well. So again, from distance and with the computer evaluation of the bar, you can see how easy it is to play for white. Nonetheless, in a practical situation here, it looks really scary. Now, computer actually thinks the best move here is bishop g4, but after queen takes b2 and bishop takes f3, computer says, you know what, I'll take the bishop, give back the queen here, and in this position, even though black is probably okay, white is for choice with the double op combo, the two Bs on g3 and f1 in particular, because say you play a move like knight to b4, white can go bishop e5, and after knight takes a2, now white can play bishop h3, and the bishops are very, very active here. You have a bit of a wooden shield in the center of the board. Bishop can go to d4, other bishop on h3 very active, maybe rook a1, rook b1, or even rook d1, depending on the situation. Now again, white is completely fine, but to see this from so far out is very, very difficult. Instead, BaiJinshi plays what I think most of us would do, which is he goes king to e2, basically saying, you know what, you sacrificed the queen, this is complete nonsense. In the long run, the queen will be worth more than the rook and the knight. So we get rook takes rook here on d8, and now BaiJinshi decides to capture the pawn on b2, and here Ding plays the move knight to a4, which is an excellent move. Probably what BaiJinshi was expecting was rook to d2, but now after takes, and not king takes d2, sorry, knight takes c6 first, takes king d2, white simply has an extra pawn. As we can see from doing basic math, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course white also has the bishop pair. Worth noting that if you were to play king takes bishop first, you would actually lose the game, because after knight to e4 check, when the king moves, I can take the bishop, attacking the rook. When you take back on g3, I take the knight. You can no longer capture the bishop on g3, and black simply has an extra knight on the board. So in this position, BaiJinshi no doubt expecting rook d2, but Ding correctly realizes here that with these knights jumping towards the center, the king on e2 combined with the lack of development for the bishop on f1 or the rook on h1, that you can go after the white king. So we get knight to a4, queen to c2 is played, and now we get knight to c3. BaiJinshi plays king to f3, and now we get this unbelievable move, rook to d4. Now this is an incredible move by Ding Liren, and it's very, very powerful. The reason this move is so powerful is that, first of all, if white captures the rook on d4, after knight takes pawn, you fork the king and the queen. When the king moves, you take, and as we can do from basic mathematics, there are 2 knights and 2 bishops on the board. White has 2 bishops and a knight, so white is simply missing a horse. Additionally, if you don't take the rook and you play just a quiet move like bishop e2, you actually get checkmated on the spot here by g4 check, and after knight takes pawn, bishop takes, the rook guards the bishop. So the rook basically is a very effective piece here on d4, and white has a lot of issues to resolve, and already here it's almost impossible to solve them. So BaiJinshi plays h3, trying to stop the checkmate threat on g4. We get h5 from Ding, again trying to threaten mate in 1 again here, and now Bai plays the move bishop to h2. Now in this position, computer thinks that after e4 it's not lost on the spot. Nonetheless, after rook takes pawn here with the knight protecting the rook, white has to sack the queen. If you go knight c6, same thing, you get checkmate in 2 with bishop g4 and h takes g4. King simply has no squares to move to, and if you move the bishop now, I have knight to d4, king g3, and then h4 checkmate as well. So white would have to sacrifice the queen on e4 here, and after knight takes e4, king e4, let's just say f5, king f3, and f4, knight takes c6, takes bishop h2, and then move like bishop f5. Black is close to winning here due to the terrible bishop on h2 behind the pawn wall. King is out in the open on f3, rook e8, bishop e4 is one idea, maybe even g4 with bishop d6, and white is lost. Now again, very, very difficult to spot from distance. So here, Bai, not really seeing how to keep the game going, decides to play bishop h2. You don't give back the material, and you still have this queen, and you're hoping for something special to happen. So here we get g4 from Ding Liren. BaiJinshi goes king g3, and now Ding plays another incredible move, rook to d2, sacrificing the rook for a second time in this game. Now again, the rook is completely poisoned here, because if you play queen takes rook, I have knight e4 forking the king and the queen, so you can't go there. Additionally, you can't really keep the queen on this light square diagonal. As you move the queen away from the e4 square, this knight e4 move is more or less going to end the game on the spot. Bai, nonetheless being a true trooper here, decides to keep the game going, and he plays the move queen b3 rather than resigning. Ding goes knight to e4 check, and now we get king h4. If king to f4 were to be played here, you can go rook takes pawn. If king takes e4 is played, now it's a very simple mate in a couple of moves with bishop to f5 check. No squares on d3 or d4, both are covered. Rook guards the bishop, and after king to d5, you go rook d8 check, knight d7 takes, bishop d6, rook takes d6, and it's checkmate once again. King simply has no squares that it can move to here. So Bai continues with king to h4 in this position, and now we get bishop to e7 check, king takes h5, only move. We get this move king to g7. Now a move that I don't know if this is actually the absolute best move, but nonetheless it's a move that is good enough, because here black wants to simply move the bishop and move the rook over to h8 and checkmate the king. Bai plays bishop to f4 here, trying to maybe create an idea with bishop h6 check. Ding goes bishop to f5 here. We get bishop to h6, preventing black from playing rook h8 and checkmating the white king on h5. Ding goes king to h7, and now Bai plays move queen takes b7. If you were to play a move like pawn takes g4, for example, now there's bishop to g6 check, knight takes bishop, pawn takes, and it's simply checkmate. King has no squares that it can move to. The bishop on e7 covers both the dark squares. So here Bai plays queen takes b7, and now we get the move rook takes f2 played by Ding, threatening another checkmate with this move knight to g3, and the king will have no squares. Here we get to move bishop to g5, trying to prevent something, and now Ding again finds the absolute best move by going rook to h8. Very simple idea here, that you want to move the king and checkmate the king. If white takes the bishop, for example, just king g7, bishop guards the pawn, only move is bishop h6, and after rook takes bishop, the king is simply stuck, and that is checkmate as well. So here Bai plays knight takes f7, and now Ding goes bishop to g6 check, king takes g4, and now another incredible move, knight to e5 here, and in this position Bai Jinshi resigns the game because mate is unavoidable. If you play king to h4 here, now you can go king to g7. Sorry, not king g7, sorry, king g8, correct move. King g7 does not work, so after knight takes h8, you cannot capture the bishop due to the pin. But when you go king to g8 here, if white were to block with a knight, rook takes h6 is mate, king can't move anywhere, and these knights cover these two critical squares on g4 and g3, and when you take the rook, now I can go bishop takes bishop, and the bishops cover all the squares, the knights also guard some squares in the center of the board, and the king is just done on h4, it's just dead, the game is over. So in this position, Bai resigns, and the other line that I didn't show is knight takes knight, and after knight takes knight, there's bishop f5 check, king to h5, and now you go king g7, only move is bishop h6, and once again, rook takes h6 is checkmate. King simply has no squares. So a really phenomenal game played by Ding Liren against Bai Jinshi. It's probably, in my opinion, the best game that I've ever seen from an attacking vantage point. A lot of moves are good, but they're not only moves, they're not easy to spot, and Ding was able to be a calculating machine and spot all of the tactics in this game. And as I said before, probably the best game that I think I've ever seen of Ding's from an attacking standpoint. Also a game that would make the former world champion Michail Tal very proud. All right, so we have another game that we're going to look at as well, which is a game which Ding Liren plays with a black piece once again against Teimour Radjabov from Azerbaijan. Now, this game was played in the Tata Steel event in 2015 in a classical time control. So the game starts with d4, Radjabov having the white pieces. We get d4, knight f6, c4, and here Ding plays g6. Now, for those of you guys who are relatively new to chess or weren't following before the pandemic, you probably, as I said before, think of Ding as being this very quiet positional player. But in the old days, as Ding was rising through the ranks, he really loved to play the King's Indian defense. And in this case, he plays against one of the two foremost experts on the King's Indian, Teimour Radjabov. The other foremost expert on the King's Indian, of course, is somebody who's doing the commentary on this video. So we get knight to c3, bishop to g7 is played, e4, d6, knight f3, castles, and now Radjabov plays this h3 system. Here Ding plays e5, we get d5, and now knight to h5. Now the idea behind white playing h3 here is that if you move the knight to e8, which would be a standard approach, white can play g4, trying to prevent f5, and if you go f5 here, after takes, and rook g1, there's an open g file. White can also play some quiet moves just to illustrate the point, where eventually white castles to the queen side. So now there are all kinds of threats on the g file, potentially ideas in the center of the board as well, and it's just very easy for white to play. So after d5, knight to h5 is played. Now if white were to play g4 here, you can simply go knight to f4 and you get this great bastion, and if white ever takes the knight, it opens up scope for this bishop on g7 here. Additionally, with white not being able to play g4, black will be able to play f5 in a move or two. So we get g3, very standard theoretical move. Ding plays f5, pawn takes, and now we get the move knight to g5. White has a couple of ideas here. First of all, white wants to capture the knight on h5. Additionally, white can try to jump to e6 with the knight and or play g4 down the road. One example being, say, knight to f6, g4 takes, bishop g4, say queen c2, and suddenly there's all kinds of pressure towards this pawn on h7, and after h6, white can even go knight e6, and as you'll notice here, this pawn on h6 is super weak. There's queen g6, and just like that, black is close to lost in this position. So queen to e8 is played here by Ding. We get bishop to e2 from Rajabov, knight to f6, and now the move bishop to e3. Rajabov quite simply here trying to develop the bishop, develop the queen, and castle the king to the queen side. So we get knight to a6, queen to d2 is played here. Not queen to c2, by the way, because at some point there might be a move like knight to b4 attacking the queen on c2. So you get the move queen to d2, and now we get bishop d7. Rajabov castles out of the center, and Ding plays h6. Now here, Rajabov plays this move knight to f3. Now in this position, knight to e6 is probably a little bit better, simply because after bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, white can play these quiet moves like rook d to g1 with the idea of g4 and or capturing the pawn on h6 down the road. However, as a human, when you look at the position, you probably think, well, if this happens, this is the only move bishop takes pawn. But now after knight to e4 here, attacking the queen, knight takes knight, and queen takes h6, knight to g5 and knight c5 here. Black has great pawns in the center. If white plays a move like h4, you can maybe even just go e4, opening up the scope. There are ideas like knight to d3 or even queen to f6. And just looking at the position from a general intuitive standpoint, it feels like black should be better. And Rajabov, being an expert on the King's Indian as well, he definitely is going to feel more comfortable looking at these structures. He's going to be a little bit biased towards the black perspective. So therefore, Rajabov goes knight to f3, and now we get the move knight to c5 played by Ding. Rajabov plays knight to h4. Now bishop takes c5 is a move here, but one of the reasons that it feels scary to play this is because after pawn takes, say you go king to b1 and black plays e4, suddenly the diagonal is opening and you don't even have this d4 or g5 square to get to e6. Of course, pawn will capture the knight, same thing with g5, and now after say knight g1 and knight to h7, all of a sudden it feels really, really scary to play. So Rajabov goes knight to h4. We get knight c to e4 played here. The knights come off the board. We get queen to c2, and now Ding plays this move knight to g5. Now I love this move, and on first glance as you look at this move, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the reason is very clear cut. If white were to play a move like king to b1, now you can play f4, opening up the diagonal for the bishop and the knight to capture this pawn on h3 potentially. Additionally, if white tries to stop f4 from black by playing f4 himself, after takes, and say bishop a4, b3, and bishop d7, your knight is going back to e4 here. You have this great open diagonal towards this white king on c1. Feels very, very scary, very hard to play. Now, of course, for the computer, it just says nobody cares about this open diagonal. It's not a big deal. I'm going to go bishop d3, and I'm completely fine. But for us humans, when you look at the position, if you don't see something concrete where there's a 4 sequence of moves, it just looks wrong objectively to allow all these threats on the diagonal. So here we get the move bishop to d3, which is played by Rajabov, and here Ding plays e4. Now f4 in this specific position would not be a great move, because after takes here, white can just go bishop to d2, and now if you try to capture on h3, suddenly there's bishop to h7 and then knight to g6, ending the game on the spot. And if you don't take the pawn on h3, let's just say you play a move like bishop to e5, for example, now white can go rook to g1 with ideas like knight g6 and h4, and the king on g8 is very, very weak here, and white is probably close to winning. So in this position, Ding plays e4 here, realizing that the f4 idea isn't working, but he can still open up the diagonal for this dark square bishop. Rajabov plays bishop to e2, and now Ding goes rook to c8. Here we get king to b1, trying to sidestep threats on the c file, because it's very clear that after rook c8, black wants to open up the c file and activate this rook. So here we get c5, and now Rajabov plays d takes c6 en passant. Ding captures correctly with the rook, simply guarding the pawn, but also ideas like rook a6 and rook b6 come into play now, with a lot of threats towards this pawn on b2 and the king on b1 as well. Queen to d2 is played here by Rajabov, and Ding goes bishop to e6, threatening potentially to capture the pawn on c4. Here we get this move bishop takes g5, played by Rajabov, pawn takes bishop, queen takes, and now rook to a6. And on first glance, you look at the position and you look at the eval bar, you'll see that white has an extra pawn on the board. But the problem here is that black has these great ops on g7 and e6, threats like queen to a4 here, threats like b5 as well, and white doesn't really have any checkmating ideas. If you play a move like knight to g6, for example, I can just go rook to f6, and where's your attack? There is no real attack. You can play a move like bishop h5, but after queen to a4 here, suddenly a2 is weak, c4 is weak, we have a right triangle as well, and say a3, queen c4, all of a sudden both of these diagonals are opening up, rook is active, king on b1 is super weak here. So again, with the bar, you think the bar extra pawn at first glance white is better, but the problem is that at the end of the day, it's much easier for black to play. And then additionally, one thing we haven't talked about is player styles. Now, as we know, Timur Radjabov, very aggressive player, likes to play the King's Indian, likes to play Sveshnikov's Sicilians. He likes to be on the attacking side, but in this case, he has the extra pawn and he has to defend, whereas he's predisposed to preferring the attacking position. So it's already a big advantage for Ding. So the game continues with rook to d2 here. Now, sort of the start of going the wrong direction. Computer thinks that you should play this very funny looking move b3, and white's just better. For us humans, this looks like a ridiculous move because first of all, you're just opening up this diagonal once again. You worry about something like down the road rook b6 and queen a4, and it just feels horrible. Of course, computer just says you can play, not g4, sorry, here that you can play something like rook to c1, and after queen to a4 is played, you can play this very ridiculous move, rook to c3, can't capture the rook due to the pin, and even after queen to a3, white goes rook hc1, and you go rook a6, rook c2, somehow, miraculously, white is guarding on the queen side. But again, to us humans, this just looks ridiculous. There's no way that you can play this position, and it's a perfect example of why we are only human at the end of the day, because we have these biases, these predispositions, and it's just not possible to ignore them in the game when you're being attacked by your opponent. So in this position, we get rook to d2 by Radjabov. Ding plays b5 here, trying to open up this diagonal for the bishop and the rook here. Additionally, if you play a move like rook to c1 here, which is actually playing the game, you can maybe take and even open up the b file here. One example, say get the queen, get the rook, use these bishops on e6 and g7 and try to win the game. So rook c1 is played here, and now Ding plays queen f7. The correct move, if you were to take instantly after bishop takes, and rook takes, queen to b5, for example, white can simply go rook c7, creating the classic kebab, and just like that, it's GG because the b2 pawn is guarded by the rook on d2. And if you play a move like queen f1, king c2, there are no more checks here. d3, queen gets captured, c4, the queen also gets captured. So Ding plays queen to f7 here. Now if takes, you lose the pawn on a2, and here knight g6 is played by Radjabov. Now this is sort of a step in the wrong direction here. Computer thinks you can still play rook dc2 and you're okay, but obviously once again after rook to b8 here, this looks horribly scary for white. Black's threatening to take, open up the b file, and it just looks disastrous. Nonetheless, computer just says you can play the quiet move b3 and keep an advantage, but we're not going to get perfect play, and that's just life. So we get knight g6 here, and now Ding finds an excellent move, bishop to f6, attacking the queen. On first glance, you go, oh no, there's knight e7, this is a classic fossil and a double check as well. But black can just go king h7, and white is lost here. If you check on h4, you do a Botez gambit. If you check on h5, I just swap the juicers and take the knight on e7, and I have an extra bishop on the board. So Radjabov goes queen to h6, and here Ding plays rook to b8. As you can tell, the bishop covers e7 and h8, so suddenly white has no attack on the king side, and already here, it's very difficult to play. Radjabov, however, does find the best move, which is knight to f4, and after bishop takes, he sacrifices the rook with rook takes c4. Now bishop takes c4 is actually a better move, and after takes and knight d5, computer only thinks that black is very slightly better after all of the pieces come off here with queen takes d5, because white can play this very weird looking move rook c2 to guard the pawn, or maybe even just start checking the king all over the board with queen f6, queen h8, h7, g7, etc. Nonetheless, black has a very nice advantage of 0.69 after queen to f7. At any rate, Radjabov, being a very aggressive player, very tactical player, he decides to sacrifice the rook here with the hopes that he can use the light square bishop, maybe put the knight on d5 or h5 and get an attack of his own and checkmate this black king on g8. So here we get the move knight to d5 played by Radjabov, and now bishop g7 played by Ding. Excellent move here, attacking the queen. And now after queen g5, he finds the correct move, which is pawn to c3, attacking the rook on d2, but also potentially the pawn on b2. Additionally, if white tries to move the rook to guard the pawn on b2, you hang the juicer on d5, and if you move the rook to say d1, then you lose to rook takes b2 on the spot, and it's instant death. So Rajbov plays bishop c4 here, trying to discover the queen on f7 with knight e7 or knight to f6. Now Ding, again using very good calculation, correctly captures the rook here, realizing that after knight to f6 check, he can very quietly slide the king over to f8 here. If you were to go king to h8, this would actually lead to a forced checkmate for white, with queen to h4, bishop h6, queen takes bishop, queen h7, and then queen takes queen, and the king is stuck in the corner. So he goes king to f8, we get knight to h7 played by Rajbov, king to e8 is played. You cannot capture the queen on f7 because then I get a new queen by promoting the pawn. So knight to h7 check is played, we get king e8, Rajbov takes the queen, Ding captures back, and now the smoke is cleared just a little bit where black has 2 rooks and a bishop in return for a queen and a knight. However, with this passed pawn and these rooks very active combined with his great bishop on g7, it's still much better for Ding. We get queen takes f5 played here, king g8 is played, and now Rajbov blunders by playing this move king to c2. It's still not completely over after this move queen to d5 check here, because if black plays king h8 trying to dodge the checks, white can now go king c2, and after rook takes b2 and king d1, if you play rook a takes a2, there's a very weird repetition with queen a8 check. Take the pawn, and then you can start checking on all the light squares here, and the game will end in a draw. Again, very dank stuff, very difficult to understand, but it does lead to a draw. Instead, Ding decides to play the move, in this position, Ding could capture the knight on h7, and after queen takes e4 is played, you can go king h8, queen h4, king g8, queen to c4, and now you can play this move d5, and after takes, king h8, queen h5, blocking with the rook here, and the bishop is dual purpose. It guards the rook on h6, but you also capture the pawn on b2 next move. Additionally, white cannot check on e8 because then the rook on b8 would capture the queen. So queen d5 would have been the only way for Rajbov to keep the game going, but again, I suspect both players getting a little bit low on time here, and he blunders with this move king to c2, because now after rook takes b2 check is played, king d1 only move here. There's this very nasty move rook to b1. Now it's very likely at this point Rajbov probably saw rook takes pawn, and again after queen e6 takes king g8, queen to d5, this would be a draw, but he probably getting low, didn't spot it, and so he just plays this line. And now after rook to b1 check, Rajbov resigns the game, because here the only move that you can play is king takes pawn. If you move the king, I get a queen, and after king takes pawn, rook takes a2 check, c3 square is covered by the bishop, d3 square covered by the pawn, king e3 only move, and now you go rook e1 check. Once again, all squares are covered, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, king f4 only move, and now rook takes pawn check, winning the queen on f5 and then the knight on h7, and with it the game ends. So after rook to b1 check is played, Timur Rajbov resigns this game. Ding Liren gets a really nice win in the King's Indian. This is not the only game that Ding has played in the King's Indian that I'm a big fan of, but again, we don't have endless time to go over all the games. Maybe in the future I'll do another video of some other Ding games that he's won in the King's Indian. But that's going to be it for right now. So once again, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video of a couple of my favorite games of the new world chess champion Ding Liren. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you haven't already, and we'll be back soon with some more great YouTube only content. See you guys. Bye.